You know, the digital economy, which we talk about a lot in on this show, is not just digital. There are many, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of flesh and blood stories behind the products we order and receive online. And here to talk about that with us now is Dave Jamieson. Dave is the Huffington Post's labor reporter, and he has written a terrific piece on the life and death of an Amazon warehouse temp. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, RJ.
So tell us a little bit, first of all, about the story you wrote, what you found out, and what you think its broader implications are.
Sure. So the story deals with a temp worker who passed away on the job at an Amazon warehouse south of Richmond. Um, Basically, the thing to know about Amazon warehouses is that they rely largely on temp workers. Right now, we're in early November here. We're starting to go into the period known as peak in Amazon. Sort of this huge ramp up that goes on ahead of Black Friday and right on through the holidays. And Amazon has something like 90,000 warehouse workers around the country. They're going to rely on 90,000 to 100,000 temp workers this coming season, right? That's how huge peak is for them. You often see these warehouses double in size. And there's kind of a two-tier system inside these warehouses where you have a lot of full-time direct hires who are employed by Amazon, get all the benefits that go with that. And then you have this other class of workers who are temporary workers. And when they come on, they're basically told, if you do really well, there's a decent chance Amazon is going to hire you. And if you can do that, they call it conversion. You convert into an Amazonian. And if you can do that, your pay is going to go up a little bit, and you're going to get these benefits that you weren't getting, and you're going to have a stable job. It's a big thing. And so workers are really, it's like a competition almost during peak to see who can hack it and who can't. And those who are left standing after peak are the ones who are gonna come on with full-time jobs.
You know, just thinking about the math for a second there, and then we'll get into the story of the worker you profiled. But just thinking of the math, Dave Jamieson, you know, if you have 90,000 or so regular workers, there's not that much turnover. There'll be some, of course, probably a fair amount. But if you take, what, 5% of that or so and compare it to 90,000 temp workers, then the chance of any one of those temp workers getting a permanent job is pretty slim. I mean, it's possible, but it's a long shot, right?
That's right. If you ask Amazon, well, how many of these people are going to convert, they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you exactly how many converted last year either. Last year, Amazon had something like 80,000 seasonal workers. You ask how many converted, they'll say thousands. That's the answer you get. So it's very hard to know. But you'll know if you work in one of these warehouses. One thing everybody says is they see these mass cullings. Where people, someday a manager comes up and taps you on the shoulder and basically your time is up. And so you're working there, kind of under the constant threat of losing your job, and you know that you have to keep hitting your marks. Hitting rate, as they call it in these warehouses, or you're going to be cut loose like the rest of them.
And there's a lot of technology, which you describe very well in the story. There's a lot of technology that measures productivity and how quickly you move from place to place, and so it's really. I'll tell you, before we even get in, as we set the stage for this individual worker. It really struck me, and you did a great job here on this piece, The Life and Death of an Amazon Warehouse Temp. It really struck me like a dystopian science fiction novel where your every movement is monitored, and you have this long shot chance of maybe getting the kind of job you can survive on, but first you must prove your worth. Only one will be left standing. I mean, it set up this grim, sort of insidious kind of game where you have a chance, and if you really, really knock yourself out, I was going to say really, really kill yourself, but sadly this worker actually did pass away. if you really, really excel, maybe we'll give you something. Did you have a dystopian feeling writing about this?
Well, this is computerized performance monitoring at its most basic, right? What these workers do. The man I wrote about was what's known as a picker. This is the guy who scurries around the warehouse and grabs whatever you just ordered on Amazon, 10 minutes ago. And everything you do goes into the system. And as a picker, first of all, if you ever get the opportunity to take a tour of an Amazon warehouse, you should, because it's pretty fascinating. What they have in there, it's a system called chaotic storage. Stuff comes in the door. There isn't a designated place for books or tools or anything. A stower just finds the nearest shelf to put it on, puts it there, scans it, and then the system knows where it is. So these pickers are walking through these giant warehouses. The one I wrote about was the size of 18 football fields. And they are picking whatever the scanner tells them to pick out. The scanner just simply tells you aisle A215, row whatever. You go, you fetch, you put it in your bin, and then it spits out the next one. And that is your day. And you're going to walk 15 miles in a shift doing that as a picker. But everything is being recorded. Your entire performance is a manager can watch it in real time, how you're doing. And so all the workers, I talked to more than 50 workers, in the course of reporting about this. And what all they said, worker after worker, just said it's rate, 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 rate. It's all about rate. If you're at 98% hitting rate, they want to know why you're not hitting 100%. And so because you have these managers who have the pressure on them coming from their managers and coming on down from corporate all the way down the line, there's this huge pressure for everybody to be hitting rate, and so a lot of workers at the bottom say it does feel dehumanizing.
Yeah, and you make the point in your piece, by the way, and we should say that, and then we'll pivot to the story of Jeff Lockhart Jr. But you make the point in your piece. This is not one of the Amazon warehouses that was guilty of what seemed to be some violations in terms of 100-degree temperatures and so on that got a lot of publicity about a year ago. This is kind of standard operating procedure. This is not this is the norm we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, Amazon has more than 50 of these fulfillment centers. I mean, they're going to be a little different from one to the other, but they all have more or less the same system going on. And this warehouse is the latest generation. This was built in 2012 when Amazon really branched out. For a long time, for many years, Amazon they didn't go into many states. They tried to be in as few states as possible, and that was for tax reasons, so that customers wouldn't have to pay sales tax on stuff. They eventually threw that strategy out just because they were so ambitious in bringing 1-day and 2-day delivery, and so their network is spread out all over, and it's always growing in hopes of bringing customers more stuff and bringing it to them faster. I mean, they just rolled out 1-hour delivery in certain big markets out in California, where you click on something and they guarantee they're going to have it to you within an hour, and it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah,
and you can imagine the work that goes into that. Yeah. From the warehouse right out to the person driving it, the subcontracted driver, going to have to run it over to your office or your home. It's an amazing logistics network.
Yeah, no, very well said. So tell us a little bit about Jeff Lockhart Jr. and his story.
So Jeff, I felt like he was very emblematic of sort of the struggle you see in post-recession America, really at the bottom of the economy. This was a guy who had a high school degree, and after that, just a credential from DeVry, which is a for-profit college. He'd worked for a long time at a building supply store, and he got laid off after the housing crash. Spent more than a year flitting around trying to find any work he could. The only work he could find in Virginia was at this Amazon warehouse that had just showed up, and that was the case for a lot of people down there. It's very hard to find jobs, but this big Amazon warehouse opens up, and there was a lot of hope surrounding that this was going to be some kind of toehold into the middle class. But Jeff, he ended up working as a temporary worker. He started in the first peak there, and he made it through. He was a hacker. He was a very, very good worker. That was documented within Amazon's own system, and he made it through peak. This was a big guy. He was 6'3", 300 pounds. He was a picker. He'd have to walk 15 miles a day, but he did it. He was a big hustler. He made it through peak. He never did convert. He thought he was going to convert, like a lot of people. He wasn't sure when it was going to happen. And then in January 19th, after he'd made it through peak, he ended up dying on the job. He collapsed on the third floor in the middle of a pick, and had suffered what's known as sudden cardiac death. Um,
So,
he was taken out of the warehouse on a stretcher, ended up going to the local hospital, passed away, and nobody ever heard anything about it. It didn't end up in the newspapers, the local papers down there. Amazon was eventually cleared of. They weren't faulted. This was deemed natural causes, as it was heart related. But because of his temp status, the family was really left without anything. He had no life insurance or health insurance through his job because he was a temporary worker. And so you see kind of when that sort of tragedy happens, how there's no safety net for this huge sprawling contingent workforce that's doing a lot of the work in bringing us our products that we order.
so I know people will be wondering, and we're talking with Dave Jamieson, labor reporter for the Huffington Post. I know listeners will be wondering, of course, was the heart attack related to his work, or was he hustling so quickly, big guy, and all of that contributed to his death, or do we just not know?
The truth is, it's impossible to know. I had cardiologists review the autopsy. It wasn't a great autopsy. And just not knowing exactly what happened beforehand, not knowing what symptoms he exhibited, it's really impossible to say exactly what happened or what role the work played in it. And I was very careful in writing the story, and when I talk about it, this story to me, I'm not saying Amazon killed this guy.
Right.
There's really no saying medically exactly what happened here. My story is really about what does happen when somebody who's employed in such a precarious situation doing work for you, what happens when that person dies, and what is there to support them. And in this case, not much at all.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm not sure how you found the story of Jeff, but it resonates in a number of different ways, including the fact that he got a degree from one of the for-profit colleges that is widely considered to be predatory. The fact that he was hustling so hard under such challenging circumstances, which seems, almost metaphorical for a whole group of people. And look, the nature of his death, as you are very scrupulous to point out, there's no evidence that this hustling or this job did it to him, but you can't help wonder, or I can't help wonder whether this was a guy who, if he did have warning symptoms and it wasn't related to the job, did he have health insurance? And if he didn't, was that a reason he didn't have it checked out? And on and on. But it's a very resonant story.
Yeah, as I said, I felt like he was really kind of representative of a certain segment of the economy right now. And what was really interesting in reporting this was having talked to so many people who had gone through that warehouse as temps. And just person after person told me, when I took that job, I was led to believe that if I did well, I was going to be on full time. And these people all ended up very disappointed. Many of the people that I spoke to ended up kind of unceremoniously cut loose. And these were people who were kind of in desperate straits at the time. People who, like Jeff, had recently been laid off from other jobs, or people who have just had a hard time, finding anything stable in this economy. And I mean, I spoke to people who the way they found out that they no longer had a job was that their key card no longer let them into the warehouse. So nobody informed them. They showed up. They got there to work. They couldn't get in, and they're saying, "What's going on?" And security guard says, "Well, they must be done with you." So that, in that sense, people in interviews portrayed a pretty demoralizing system
And dehumanizing. Now, how did you find, just out of curiosity, Dave, how did you find the story of Jeff Lockhart Jr.? How did you identify his as being, a representative story? How did you find him?
I found him. I submitted public records requests for investigations of Amazon warehouses. As I said, this was hadn't been reported in the local press. But one fascinating thing in interviewing people, they just say they felt like workers there felt like word just didn't get out. They said it was several workers told me it was really odd. They felt like it was kept very quiet. And that bears out in the fact that it never really became public. I saw it because whenever a worker dies on the job, there has to be an investigation, and that's how I found out what happened to Jeff, and that led me to his widow and to his family, and eventually to other workers who were there when this all went down.
Well, you've written a terrific piece, and I can't help but thinking again that, as I know you were thinking in writing it, that Jeff Lockhart Jr. and his tragic death, that there's something about it that's a representative of an entire generation, entire group of workers that's been deprived the chance for a solid, secure livelihood, and instead is forced to chase chimerical opportunities and go the extra mile in return for promises that may never be kept. So for that, I congratulate you. Terrific piece of work. Dave Jamieson, labor reporter for the Huffington Post, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
You bet. And we will be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.